Hello everyone, I'm here today to do my January wrap-up. So I have read 9 books in this month, and a few of them I really enjoyed, so I think I'm going to just go into the books. So the first book I finished this month is Oswald by Marit Kaplan, translated by Peter Graves, and this is a very poetic account of everyday rural life of Oswald, which is a village in Sweden, and it basically has like this kind of almost poem form. It's not rhyme, but it's kind of these little snippets of the lives of all the people in this village, and yeah, a bit like their thoughts on what's happening to the rural area. So there's a lot of talk, for example, about the kids that have to go to school to the next village and how long it takes and how yeah, and handy that is, and also how things like that, also the lack of hospitals is making people move away from this village, the lack of jobs as well, and so the village is getting smaller and smaller, and the people that are left are also older and older, so they also need more assistance, and there's an imbalance, and it seems to these people that the government is not really doing anything about it. So that's kind of like the main idea of the book. I have a full review of it, so you can check it out if you're interested, but I really enjoyed it. I think we don't often have this discussion as much of just like what's happening to rural communities and the value that they might have and the value we might be losing by losing those communities. So I think this did a very good job at that, and I really highly recommend. The second book I started this month, I didn't finish, and I just DNF'd it, and that is Solenoid by Mircea Cartarescu, translated by Sam Cotter. I started this in audiobook, and I got about 20% of the way in, and I was just honestly, I can see why this is a favorite for many people. It's very well written and it's very philosophical, but honestly it just had certain things that just put me off, and the topics that it was going into were just not my thing, so I decided to DNF it at the end. The writing was very visceral. It was very descriptive. Like when he was having sex, it was very graphic. When he had 2 or 3 pages talking about how one of his tooth was removed, things like that, and I was not interested in that gruesome thing, and I remember the point at which I decided to stop was one of those points, and I was like, yep, right, I don't need this anymore, I'm just gonna stop it. Basically it is about this Romanian teacher that buys a house, and this house has something in it that is kind of magical almost, like a force inside the house, like a sun, and it's supposed to cure everyone with all the diseases that they ever had, and this teacher had quite a diseased childhood, so then it was very interesting for him, and we do go into a lot of detail about all his medical issues, as I said. Overall I just found it very visceral and also very masculine, had a very masculine energy to it, and none of the topics that they were being discussed was particularly interesting to me, so that's, yeah, I decided not to go on with it. Then the next one I read in ebook, and that was Prophet Song by Paul Lynch, which was the winner of the Booker Prize last year, and it's about a family that kind of slowly disintegrates in this kind of dystopian Ireland. So there has been more and more protests and strikes, and the husband of this family is part of the organization of the strikes, he's part of the teachers union, and so he's the first one to kind of disappear. He seems to be in jail, and then after that this woman is left with her 4 kids. The older 2 are like 15 and 12 or something like that, and the 15-year-old decides to go join the rebels, and then there is also the younger, like she has a baby, like a newborn almost, and she has to get milk, and then the other 2 kids are kind of left a little bit to their own devices, and so they also have issues that appear because they are not very they don't listen to their mother a lot. They are in this phase of whatever you say is wrong and I'm right kind of phase, and so we follow this woman kind of trying to survive and trying to make her family survive. And I think that for me the worry and the grief that the mother goes through is the strongest part of the whole book. However, I also found her a very unlikable character. Like, she's very focused especially on the boys and not so much on the girl or the baby. It's kind of like it seems that the dead or the troubled child is always the most important, and she overlooks the other kids a lot, which I didn't like. And she was also not particularly independent, which I was kind of surprised about, because the description of the book kind of makes you feel like it's gonna be that way. And of course she's independent because she's left alone after her husband goes to jail, but it was like out of necessity, not really like she was struggling. Like it was a struggle train basically. It was not like she felt like she could do things by herself, which completely understandable, but yeah, it was not kind of what I was expecting from this book. I also didn't particularly enjoy how this book followed gender stereotypes, not only with the mom and the dad, but also like the kids. The two middle ones at the beginning, they seem equally defiant to their mother, but one is a boy and one is a girl, and so the boy goes those stupid things and the girl ends up staying at home taking care of the baby and being a good girl after all. And that just, like, I don't know, somehow it just didn't grab me the wrong way as well, because like, I don't know, it's supposed to be the present or the future, and I just felt like that was a little bit cliche as well. Overall, I found it a little bit gimmicky and not that new or interesting, so I was a little bit disappointed, to be honest. The next book I read was an audiobook, and that was Pageboy by Elliot Page, and this is basically a memoir of Elliot Page. His early years, his career, how it started, how he felt about his image, because he obviously is a trans person, and so also about his transition and everything. So yeah, but it focuses a lot on the pain that he had when he was younger, and how his family was not in a position to support that, and how much damage that did, and to himself and to like the family as a whole. I think it was very brave, because he is not portrayed as a very particularly good or put together person, which, I mean, the things I've seen from Elliot Page, I think he comes across as a very smart and very confident person, and this book reveals that he, at least before, he wasn't during his younger years, so that was a surprise. And I think it was very honest and very raw, and I appreciated it for that. As a book though, I think the structure was a little bit all over the place. I felt like he had kind of divided it into themes, but what that meant is that he was kind of going back and forth to points on his life that were relevant for several of these themes, so I'm not sure how well that worked, but other than that, I think it was a very raw and honest book, and I'm really happy that I read it. Next book I read was Kristin Lavransdatter's The Wreath by Sigrid Undset, and translated by Tina Nunali, and this is a Swedish classic, and in some ways it does read very similar from the classics from the UK, like Jane Eyres and your Charlotte Brontes and stuff, but there are also differences. So because this is obviously set in Sweden, and it follows Kristin, who the beginning of the book is like 12-13 years old, and at the end is around 17-18, and she is at the beginning betrothed to a man that he is a very nice man, but she falls in love with someone else. and this other someone else is not really approved by the community because he has been married before, and yeah, he's known for like having certain affairs with his like the wife, and that was a messy relationship, so he's not accepted by the community a lot. What I did like about this book, and I think it's different from other books that I have read around this time, is that eventually like Kristin has a lot more guts, or like she's doesn't think that she shouldn't have a say on this, and so she just speaks her mind, and that's like in a very strong way. So that was interesting, and also the like the way that society is, it's just like society is a lot more honest, and all of the things that are going on and the conflicts is not misunderstandings. Like there is trickery here and there, but it's like it's intentional, it's not misunderstanding. Like people say what they want to say, and things are always clear between everybody, and they might disagree, and that's where the conflict comes from, but not from misunderstanding. And I think that was kind of refreshing for me, and really nice. But yeah, overall I think this was a lot about religion, about acceptance, and about giving second chances, and I'm still not sure what to think about Erlen, which is the boy that or like the man that Kristin ends up loving and eventually marrying at the end of this book. And this is a trilogy, so I might continue because I want to know if he's actually what he says he was, or it's just like a phase to get her to marry him. But yeah, I think overall it was interesting, more interesting to me than other classics that are more known, and I am curious. I also think that the writing was easier than other classics I've read. The next book I finished is Your Wish is My Command by Dina Mohamed, and this is a big and heavy book because it's a graphic novel. And I also have a review that is going to come up for this on my channel at some point. But this is basically a graphic novel about this like magical realist world in which people can make wishes, and wishes come into bottles or cans or something, and then you open it and a genie comes out and says, your wish is my command. I think in Arabic it's like shubaik lubaik. And then you ask for whatever you want, and if there's different grades of wishes. So if you have like a third grade wish, then the genie might be a bit twisted and give you something that you didn't really want, let's say. So for example, this man wanted a Mercedes-Benz, and then he got a Mercedes-Benz in the top of a minaret or something like that. And then first wishes are like they will actually give you the wish that you're wishing for, and because the third wish especially can be very dangerous, because like the humor of the genie might make you die or something, have an accident or something like that, then they are quite regulated by the government. And we follow this kiosk man that has 3 first grade wishes, and he is a Muslim, and there is also the culture Muslims don't use wishes because Allah's wish is Allah's wish. And so he just wants to sell them, and we follow the people that buy the 3 wishes. So the first wish is bought by Aziza, who is a very poor woman that had a very tragic life, and she lost her husband, and so she wants to kind of redeem him. But the main part of the story is that when she buys that wish, the government realizes, and they are like, oh, you should not have that first wish because you are poor, so that means you cannot afford that wish, even though she worked for years to get that wish. And so there is a whole commentary about corruption and what the government does to innocent people to get their own benefit. The second wish is bought by a rich boy that is a university student and is heavily depressed, and so it goes into like all the details of depression and how that feels and all that kind of stuff. And then the third wish is left with the kiosk owner, and he wants to use it in an old friend of his because she has cancer and she's dying, but she doesn't want to. And there is that one is the most, I think, deep story. It has a lot about the end of life. It has a lot about colonialism and like the origin of these wishes and what really is important. And I think like this is just so deep and so interesting, and I loved it. Loved all the topics. I loved all the banter as well, because this was originally written in Arabic, and that's also why like the book is opening the opposite way as a normal book, because that's how Arabic does, but also in the comic. So for example, like here you will read like this instead of like this. So yeah, it has a lot of like the translation itself. I have been noticing as well that like the author puts like her little puns and her little spin on it to kind of make you realize that this was written in Arabic, and that translation is like the bare minimum so that you understand the story, but she doesn't compromise on the actual cultural aspects of translation. So I really enjoyed this, and I really recommend. Then I read another audiobook, and that was Zuleikha by Guzel Yakhina, translated by Lisa Hayden. And this book kind of deals with the Gulag system. So we follow Zuleikha, who is a woman that lives in a remote village in Kazakhstan, and she's taken to the Gulags, I think basically because she was from a different tribe that is not following like the party's things, and she meets a lot of people in the train to the Gulags. A lot of people in the train die. There is also a doctor, I think it's a German doctor in the train that is very old, and he's kind of like against the party. So there's a variety of people. We also follow the perspective of the person from the party that is responsible from taking all of these people to the Gulags, and then we also follow them once they arrive to the Gulags and how hard that is, and like it's in the middle of Siberia and they have to survive very low temperatures with very little food, and a lot of people die basically. And Zuleikha happens to be pregnant during the trip, and she does give birth kind of at the end of the trip more or less, but her husband died beforehand. And so she's trying to make her son survive as well. And basically it's a commentary on the Gulag system and that part of history in Russia. I found the writing was very lyrical, but sometimes it felt like too lyrical. Like it was almost romanticizing some brutality that was happening, that it just felt wrong to me. And that also translated into some of the parts feeling kind of emotionally manipulative to me, at least. It felt like we were supposed to feel certain things, and it lacked maybe a little bit of depth. It was more about the emotions that it was trying to provoke than about the ideas that it wanted to discuss. So, not my favorite. The next book that I read is The Bee Sting by Paul Lynch, and this is also has been everywhere. It was shortlisted for the Booker Prize last year, and it follows a family. So we follow like different parts. Follows the dad, the mom, the girl, and the boy, and basically they are all messed up, they are all unlikable, and the family is falling apart. So we first follow Cass, who is the girl, and she has some friends that are not maybe the healthiest friends. She's about to go to university, and she's having doubts about her family relationships. Then we also follow the boy, who is very into video games, and he kind of is involved into some issues at school. He's bullied, and so he goes to video games to release that, and he finds someone there that he thinks is his friend, but dark things happen. I don't know if it's considered a spoiler, but I, like, from the beginning when that appeared, I was pretty sure that that's how it was gonna end. And then we have the dad, who is seems to be a very jolly person, but he works in this garage, and his garage is really in difficulties. There is an economic crisis. I don't know if it's supposed to be the crisis of 2008, but there's an economic crisis, and his dealership is suffering from it, and so he's kind of trying to figure out his life, and he gets involved into like end of days kind of things, building a bunker with this guy and trying to build a well and supply of food and all of that for the end of the world. And then the mom is obsessed with money and position, and so all of these things are like really taking her out of her depth. And honestly, I found that I was invested into reading this and knowing what happened, and the ending, by the way, is a little bit, it's obviously left like that purposefully, but it's very ambiguous and you don't really know what happens at the end. But the plot was interesting, but the characters, I think they were a little bit cliche and a little bit flat. Like, I don't really got what the motivations of the characters were. And for example, the mom, Imelda, she has some affairs, and it seems that she's with, like, all the men in her life just wanted her because she's pretty, and that's all that there was to her character. She's pretty and she wants money, and she was a horrible mother, like a horrible mother. And then the dad is supposed to be like this nice guy, but then he has some darker parts of his life because of his identity that he cannot reveal, but he also like seems to get out into this end of the world stuff out of nothing, and the kids were probably the more relatable ones. I mean, the girl is an insufferable teenager, but at least I guess those people exist. And honestly, the perspective that I enjoyed the most was PJ, who was the little boy, but that one was the most straightforward storyline. So yeah, I don't know, I thought that I had higher expectations for this. I don't necessarily think it's a bad book, but I had higher expectations for this than what it gave. So yeah, a bit disappointed by this. The next book I read was Juja by Nino, Haratischvili, translated by Ruth Martin. And I read this one, basically I didn't know much about what it was about, but I have read Eight Life by the same author and really enjoyed it, so that's why I picked this up. And this is about a book that was written in the 50s in Paris, and it's very famous because the woman that wrote it was 17 years old when she wrote it, and then she committed suicide. And then in the 80s there were some people that found out this book in like second-hand shops and stuff, and there was like a wave of suicides back then. And then we have the storyline of around 2004, 2005 of two women that are kind of researching what's up with this book, basically. We do follow a lot of different perspectives in this book. I think the most important ones are the one of the women that is researching the books in 2004, and the publisher of that book who seems to have quite a big hand on things. We never quite know exactly how much, but yeah, it's a little bit of a question mark what he was doing with that book. And I think that the atmosphere that it creates is very there's a lot of verboten in this book. Like, we don't know if the women that are researching are going to follow the same path as the women before, or why all of this exactly happened. We obviously know that some of the women that are followed in this book, after a while we know that they are going to die, but yeah, like there's a lot of verboten. However, the plot did have take some time to get going. Like, obviously we follow, I don't know, like 6-7 different characters, and so it jumps every few pages to different characters, and that's like the first 50 pages. So like the first 100 pages is just set up for like how these different storylines are going to be connected. I think the writing was also good. It was not overly done or anything. It's one of those times when you don't notice it as much. There was a couple of moments that were a bit cringe, but other than that, I think it was fairly well written. And I think it's not a bad book. Maybe not as much my cup of tea as I was hoping it was gonna be, but I think it was a good book. It was a good time. The last book that I finished this month is Brother in Eyes by Alicia Kopf, translated by Mara Fayelathan. And this book is, I think it's about the author. It's kind of like a memoir, autofiction kind of situation. Non-fiction, autofiction, I don't know. Like, it has some real photos and people and stuff, but there is also some like very literary quality to it. This mainly deals with 3 different topics. So the author has a brother that is deeply autistic, and that obviously affected a lot of the things that are going on, and there are like descriptions of what her brother was doing, and what his autistic nature meant. Like, for example, he says that he had to be supervised for everything, because you run the risk that he will get so stuck on choosing his clothes for the day that he will not eat the whole day, because he will be like thinking about that for hours and hours and hours, and then eventually he will like die out of hunger because he couldn't decide on what to eat or something like that. That's the first thing that this book discusses. Then the other thing that it discusses is like the life of the author herself. So she's trying to be an artist. She's not so much a writer, but like a visual artist. And for her, having a career and how difficult it is, and how difficult it is to have a career, especially when you have someone that you know is gonna depend on you. Like, you cannot just leave everything and move to another country, for example. So there was a lot of talk of that, and of her family dynamics as well. They seemed very flawed. Like, her parents separated when they were very young, and her mom was very consumed by taking care of her brother. So that also, like, those family dynamics also affected how much she was able to live her own life the way she wanted. That's another thing that she explores. And then she seems to have a fascination for cold places. Basically, she has a lot of research here about the arriving to the Arctic and the Antarctic poles, like the South and the North Pole, and all those expeditions and what happened there. But also at that point she kind of goes to Iceland, and she also talks about her trip to Iceland and how she kind of tries to make connections between the 3 things. And obviously her career and her brother are a much more normal thing to connect, but then she also tried to connect all these things with like the ice and the cold and all of that, and that didn't work. Things that to me just didn't work, unfortunately. And And honestly, I mean, I do understand where she's coming from about her brother and how much of her life was negatively impacted by the existence of her brother, but she also comes out as very whiny. She has like a whole chapter about how she moved to her apartment and she wanted her mom to drive her to IKEA, and her mom couldn't do it for a really long time because she's a single mom taking care of an autistic son that is like 40 at this point. And she was very whiny, saying that, you know, normal families do these kind of things for each other, and the mom was like, yeah, but we are not a normal family. And she like took that really badly, so she came out quite whiny, and I didn't relate to a lot of the things that she was saying, so this was a little bit of a miss for me. I think that it's just too disjointed and too, like, I don't see what the point of this book was, basically. And there were some parts, like some chapters and some of the discussions that were interesting, but mostly I just didn't know what the point was, and I don't think it was particularly well built, so this was unfortunately a bit of a miss. So as you can see, some really good books, some not so good books, but overall I think I had quite a successful month. Let me know if you have read any of these books or you want to read them, and what you thought about them, or what your favorite read for this month is. And in the next video, bye!